Hello and welcome to the YouTube channel of Medfully, where we discuss everything medical school interview related. In today's video, we'll cover the different forms medical school interviews can take, including panel interviews, MMIs, Oxbridge interviews and asynchronous interviews. We'll discuss how each of the interview format looks like so that you can know what to expect on the interview day. As always, you can find the timestamps for all of the sections below, and without further ado, let's jump straight into it. First, let's take a look at panel interviews. As the name suggests, these interviews are held by a panel usually consisting of 2 to 3 interviewers that will talk to you and assess you throughout your whole interview. Different names for panel interviews that you can come across are semi-structured or structured interviews. And the interview board may be formed by admissions officers, teaching staff, doctors, nurses, medical students, pretty much anyone from the medical world or the university. Sometimes different panel members can have different roles. Some may ask you questions, while others may sit silently in the corner of the room or the Zoom call, just keeping time, taking notes, or listening to provide a second opinion afterwards. So please don't be put off if one of the interviewers only stares silently at you for the whole time. Such interviews tend to last between 15 and 25 minutes, but that can vary depending on the university and it can change from year to year. And as a result, there is often a larger time pressure than in MMI interviews. And so you can expect to have around 2 minutes or even less than that per question. There is one other significant difference between MMIs and panel interviews. Namely, since you speak to the same people throughout the entire panel interview, you are assessed on the overall impression you make rather than individual questions. This interview format was used last year by universities such as Barts, UCL or Nottingham, among others. While there has been a tendency to switch from panel interviews to MMIs, many schools have shifted back to panel interviews last year as they are easier to arrange online. Since medical schools may change the interview format from year to year, make sure you visit their website for the most up-to-date information. Alright, now let's put MMI interviews under our microscope. The acronym MMI stands for Multiple Mini Interviews, which actually tells us all about how the interview format looks like. The multiple mini interview format consists of several, usually 6 to 8 so-called stations. Each station will revolve around a different topic, so one may assess your motivations to study medicine, while another may present you with an ethical scenario for you to discuss. Each station will be held by a different interviewer in a separate room if the interview is held in person, or if it's arranged online, you will usually be switched to a different call once you finish the station, or the new interviewer will join your call. So basically you can treat MMIs very much like speed dating. The fact that you talk to different interviewers on each of the stations is very important, as this means that you start each station with a clean slate. In other words, the assessment of your performance on one of the stations is not influenced by any of the other stations. The new interviewer won't know if you, hypothetically, froze on the previous question and wasn't able to come up with any answer at all, although don't try this approach. And this is key to how you should approach your MMIs. You can always take a deep breath and walk into a new station as if it was a new interview. Before each station, you should be presented with an explanation of the topic you'll be discussing and how much reading time you have before entering the station, as well as the speaking time during the station. Each station can last anywhere between 3 and 10 minutes, so the overall interview will usually last between 45 and 70 minutes. But don't worry, that doesn't mean that you will have to necessarily talk for 10 minutes straight. You may be asked several questions during each of the stations. And this relates nicely to a top tip we have for your MMI interviews. Don't feel obliged to fill the entire time during a station. Allowing the interviewer to ask you further questions may sound a bit like a scary strategy, but it also allows them to really get to know you more and for you to score more points than if you were to waffle for 10 minutes straight. And if they happen to run out of questions, you can always chat with them. They are usually very kind people. Or just have some spare time to relax and summon some more energy before entering the next station. And the third item on our list are Oxbridge interviews, which technically are just a series of panel interviews, but their style and content vary significantly from regular panel interviews. At Oxbridge interviews, you can expect the vast majority of questions, which is around 70 to 80% of the questions, to be science-based or problem-solving questions. So you can only expect a few questions to be based on your motivations, personality, ethics, or the NHS. Some of the science-based questions will relate strictly to the high school curriculum you've covered, but others will require you to apply the knowledge beyond the curriculum. This means you may be asked to figure out, say, the reasons why a certain disease is caused, despite not having learned that as a part of your A-levels or the IB course, but just based on your reasoning and intuition. Interviewers at Oxbridge are unfortunately also known to throw curveballs at candidates, to examine their thinking process when faced with previously unseen questions and thus see how well they perform under stress. These questions are usually abstract and seemingly unrelated to medicine, such as, why is a tennis ball fuzzy? Or, if you were a fruit, what fruit would you be? If you can't think of a reasonable fruit that would suit your personality, don't worry. At Oxbridge interviews, you aren't expected to come up with a correct answer. More often than not, there are no right or wrong answers. The interviewers are much more interested in your thinking process instead. For instance, coming back to the fruit question, which, by the way, is a real question that was asked, it's not about the fruit that you choose, but how convincing your arguments are, whether you can form a logical and convincing argument, and whether you can think creatively at all under such stressful circumstances. It may all seem a bit random, but if you translate it to a medical context, such a skill of being able to think creatively under pressure can help you promptly come up with a resourceful solution to a patient's urgent problem. As you can sense, most candidates find Oxbridge interviews the trickiest, partially because there is an additional science material that you need to cover, and secondly, the content of the interviews is much less predictable. Lastly, we'll talk briefly about asynchronous interviews, which are a less traditional way of conducting online interviews. Asynchronous interviews are very similar to MMIs in terms of structure, but instead of answering the questions live, you are asked to record your responses and upload them to an online platform for the admissions panel to assess later. This means you are not doing the interview at the same time as the interviewer, but rather you are asked questions in the form of pre-recorded videos. And this can have some advantages. Some candidates prefer asynchronous interviews over live interviews. And last year these were conducted by, for instance, Imperial College London. So that was an overview of the 4 interview formats used by UK medical schools. Since each university may take a slightly different approach to each of the interview formats, it's really important that you visit the websites of universities you apply to for more specific information. There you can also get some invaluable knowledge, such as what topics are likely to come up, what questions were asked in the past, or what the assessment procedure looks like, so make sure you read those websites carefully. If you happen to get an interview invite, fingers crossed, you should also be given more details about the interview and its format in the email. And if you found this video useful, please consider leaving a thumbs up under this video. If there is anything med school interview related that you would like to know about, please feel free to leave a comment down below or drop us a message on Instagram, where we post a lot of cool and helpful content too. And for now, good luck with your interview preparation and see you soon.